Morning.
The non-filtering lake.
Okay, so we talked about pandemic and the Ozarks, but let's talk about Collab Lab. Amazing work this week. It seemed like maybe a challenging week. How are you all feeling?
Glad it's like we're moving on to week 4.
Figure something else. Battle with something else.
Yeah.
I learned a lot.
Did you?
Yeah, but I was so frustrated.
Too. Yeah.
Promises.
Yeah.
Give me for a loop. I did learn a lot about hooks, the difference between like class and functional components. That was mostly this morning, not the promises part, but everything else. It was great. It was euphoric once we got it like working. Thank you, Michael, for spending one of your evenings with the whole fam.
Yeah, all of us. Yeah.
I love that tweet. When I saw that, I was like,
yeah, that was really, really helpful. I think I jinxed us all because Megan and I were chatting, and I was like, I think this is going to be easy. And then I also said, I should never say that, but it's going to be easy. Or no, I think I said, my wife says never to say that, and I said it anyways, and then this all happened. So you can blame me.
Famous words.
All
last words.
Amazing, and it sounds like learned a lot. So let's see it. I'll let Alejandro run demos, and we'll see what you built.
Yeah, right. So let's see. So hopefully you have demos ready. So we will have 5 minutes each team. So who wants to start? I guess.
Tansy, you want to go?
I feel like the other team should. I feel like they have more energy. Why not go first?
But they have more energy.
But you get to eat now, right, Tansy? You're like,
I do.
Are you gonna do you have like the most giant meal plan?
I already for breakfast I had 2 plates of rice. I don't even know what I was thinking, but I was just so hungry. I was like, oh god, this is like the first time I'm having breakfast at close to noon. So yeah.
Ease back
in. So Nabil, you want to start, or Megan?
Sure. It says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
I forget that you have to do this, and I actually don't know how to not. Here we go, screen share. Try now.
Yeah. Okay.
That work? Okay.
Yep. Oh, hold on. Oh. Okay, can everyone see my screen, or did I just disable it?
No, we see you.
Okay, hold on. One more
second. There you go.
All right, we're good.
And this should work. Great.
All right, so for our user story, as a user, we want to join an existing shopping list so you can share your list with someone else. And our acceptance criteria is when the user does not already have their own token saved in local storage, then they can enter an existing token, and then on submit, if the token doesn't exist, they'll get an error that allows them to try again or create a new shopping list. And then if you enter the token and it does exist, it gives you joint control of the existing list.
All right, so we're just gonna run through this really quick. Oh, yeah, whoa, okay. Yeah, okay, so the very first thing, we're on route here. So this is the landing page. They can now navigate to join an existing shopping list, where we will give them the option to input a token into using a share code here and joining the list. So that was the first acceptance criteria. On submit, if the token doesn't exist, it'll show an error. So I know that that is not a list. And if I try to join it, it'll give an alert and it says enter a valid share code and try again. Now, let's see. And the second part of the acceptance criteria is if they get that message, allow them to try again. So we still allow them to try again. So that's the rest of that part of the acceptance criteria. So the next part is enter the token, and hitting submit saves the token to local storage, effectively giving them joint control of the list. So we know that user is an existing share code, or an existing list in our Firestore database. So if we click it, well, first, if you go to console log and you go window.local storage, you'll see that there's nothing in there. Once you click user, it'll check the database to see if it exists. It'll see that it does exist, and then it'll set a token of user to the local storage, and it'll route us to the list view. So if we look now, local storage, token, has user there. And this is the list that exists on there. And so that's it. That's the all of the acceptance criteria for the user story. I think we wanted to walk through a little bit of the code as well. I'm seeing like a whole bunch of chat. Let's see. Very good. Nice. Okay. Okay. So let's see. Some of the issues that we had, we just kind of wanted to share a little bit of our struggles during this time. We had a major issue with promises. So if you actually look at our PR, we try to detail that out. And so, yeah, so when we were validating, we were just trying to validate whether a list exists in the database or not. And so if you take a look at, let's see, share list, which is where we house the component for rendering an existing list, we have one portion of it called get existing. Oh, this is the wrong one. Great. Okay, this is like the old one that we had, but that's fine. So we had one portion where we were trying to contact the database that we would use the token. We would retrieve a promise from there. So a promise just means that it's going to wait a second. It's going to go retrieve something. Once it resolves that, it's going to pass us this, it's going to return a query snapshot object, which we can operate on. That essentially lets us check to see if it's empty or not. If it's empty, that should tell us that the list doesn't exist. If it's not empty, then we know that this is an existing list and that we could render the list view for it. What we were trying to do before was we were using these promises and we were trying to return a value, but because of the asynchronous nature of this, when we were trying to return, oh, well, let me do it. But we were, before we had, it was returning a result like true or returning a result false, and then we were trying to return the variable that we were storing it in. It would run through the whole thing. It would actually return an empty variable because it wasn't waiting for the return of the database call. So that broke everything, and we couldn't get anything done. And that was the biggest struggle that we had. So yeah, Megan, did you want to add anything else?
Even when we kind of figured out returning, I could get a return of true or false, but it was due to it not being like the async await that was suggested. It's like running through the second on submit code before it even got the variable, if I'm understanding that right. And so even though I was returning, or we were returning true and false values, the rest of the code had already executed before it could catch that. So now I know why the async await exists.
Yeah, we were basically running all the code on undefined. Cool. All right, that's it.
Right. Awesome work.
Yay.
Congratulations.
I love to hear how much you learn.
Yeah. That's amazing.
I had
All
a
right.
drink after this week. I was like, oof.
Yeah, been there. All right.
Welcome to
there.
Yeah, right. All right. So next team's up. Wants to present.
All right, so we're gonna do a dual situation. I guess I'll go first and share my screen. Just give you guys an overview of what we did, and then Tansy is gonna do a walkthrough and talk all about the app. So
Perfect.
okay, so I was about to say, everybody see my screen? We're sharing. Okay, so the description in this task, we ensured that the user could not input a duplicate item into the shopping list when the user enters an item more than once. So an example would be if you're typing grapes and then you press add, and then you type grapes again, and the app will alert you to that you already put grapes in, and there will be an error message prompted. And so let's see. Oh, well, I can say that, but I think it's kind of intuitive as far as the error message. So Tansy, do you want to present so we can show them how it works?
Yeah, for sure. So I can't. You have to stop.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. There we go. We're good to go.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so here's our magnum opus. Just like get us out of the way here. So essentially, I'm going to start with the good before we get to the bad. So the good part is that we were able to, the thing is like we were having trouble with like the asynchronous functions as well. And for me, it was also trying to decide how do I want to fetch the data? And I just like overthought that kind of thing too much. And also like there was this other area where like, well, I'll show it once we get into the code. So like, this is how I know that it kind of works. So if I put something like, I don't know, dates, and if I add it, it says, oh, this item is not in the database, we can add it, date. So I know that portion's working, it's being added to the database. Now this is the bad, yet not so bad portion. I'll show you why it's bad. So milk, I add it, right? So it's great, it looks wonderful. Item is in the list. Obviously the database also knows that too because I'm console logging it. But then I spent 3 hours last night because I can't X out this little X and I don't know what I did. But yeah, otherwise it's working. But I'll show you the code. So yeah, like just to like kind of run through what we were thinking about. At first I was like, should I make a like separate component? But I was like, no, that's too much work. So this is kind of like, instead of like, because what Alejandro kind of commented in our PR, that's what I initially thought too. I was like, oh, maybe we can just go grab the data from the get list, that portion, and then like run through it. But then I thought like, because Michael showed us those documents, I was like, maybe he really wants us to use this. You know, it was like that kind of like thing. So I was like, okay, like let me try to do like the query snapshot thing. But then when I tried to console log it, there was this situation where I had like pending promise and I didn't realize it, but a dot add is also a promise, which I figured out later, and that's why it's got stuck over and over. So yeah, that's essentially pretty much it, and I just have to figure out like the X thing. Well, but it went well otherwise.
Yeah, well, I think also too, I don't know, it just seemed like maybe this week, I don't know, there was something in the air with this week that both teams were kind of on the same page. But yeah, we had to get to this point, and I know talking to Stacy, and Stacy was like, you know, she's like, I got my kids in Smash Dash, like, yeah. So, but yeah, we did a lot of Googling. So as we hear, you know, that's what people do in the real world. And so we had to collectively get on this to this point, as well as when we talked to Michael and then Alejandro put it, so we didn't know where to go, but we were actually on this kind of train of thought the whole way. It was just progressive, but it was just actually like, how do we do it? Because we were stuck on which path to go through, and looping through the database was where we actually got, because we didn't know, because at first we were like, do we, you know, are we just doing a straight like, you know, if else, like that's it, like, or the item, and then we were like, oh yeah, we have the database, like we have to hold this whole data. Stacy was like, yeah, you have to like go through the database, and we're like, oh yeah, like that database thing. So that's where we got tripped up, was making sure that it worked through that angle, because we weren't for sure. Like, we didn't want to just kind of break the code, and we were tiptoeing around that until we got to this point.
Amazing work. I know after I got off that call with you all, I was like, oh my God, I shouldn't have even taken that call. I probably just introduced a whole new level of chaos to their lives that I didn't need to. Because I'm like, react. Hey, stop it. Put those paper towels back. I'm like, oh my God. I'm sorry.
It was fun though. It was fun.
Watch me yell at my kids and try and explain technical concepts, please.
It worked.
It's a reality show.
It worked. Yeah, we were all talking and typing fast. I was like, "This is our issue, Stacy."
Thank you.
Great work. Yeah.
So good. So good, team. Amazing work this week. Very challenging topics to cover here, but hopefully, since you both kind of struggled with the same sort of things this week, going forward, you won't struggle with those as hard, and you'll kind of understand what's happening in the other code that the other team wrote as well, because they were the same kinds of struggles. So amazing job. Okay, this week is a learning module week. Michael's gonna run a learning module, but I wanted to take a quick minute to remind you that next week will be another round of retros. So take time after this call, 3-5 minutes, to just write down some things that you noticed this week, as far as appreciations go, as far as what went well, and as far as what could be improved, so that when we get into retros next week, we can just like get straight to the point, and your cards will be like ready to go. So, Michael.
All right. Whenever I do notes like that, I'll just jump into Slack and message myself, and then it's there for me. I never lose it. So that's one helpful way to leave yourself notes. I'm gonna share my screen here. Share. I think I have to share the whole desktop because I'm gonna be going to present mode. All right, I'm gonna do a nice short presentation here. So kick back and relax, and we're gonna learn a little bit about pair programming. So the really interesting part about this presentation is that y'all are coming into it with some experience already. So as I talk about what pair programming is, I want you to think about your experience thus far and how that relates to how things are going. And hopefully you learn a few things here that you can take into your next pair programming experience and have an improved experience. So what is pair programming? So in the traditional sense, two developers sit side by side, and one person will be the driver. That person is responsible for typing and navigating the code base. This person is verbalizing what they're thinking and how they're getting their thoughts out onto the computer to keep the other person in the loop. The navigator, so if you think of it like you're sailing a ship, right? You have one person who's steering and one person who's looking out to see if there's anything in the water to be aware of or where you're going, right? They're looking at the map too, right? So the navigator is the person kind of looking at the map. They get like more of a bird's eye view because they're not spending brain cycles navigating the code base and typing. So they can again, verbalize what they're thinking, but maybe give the person driving a different perspective. So you get these two perspectives, and generally when you combine the two people in a pair programming sense, they end up being more productive than what they would be if they each went on their own. Mm-hmm. So here's some things to think about while you're pair programming. So the most important thing that I want to focus on here is that both people are learning, especially all four of you, as you go down your programming path here in Collab Lab. So when you learn something, make sure that you share it with the other person. That's part of the sweetness of pair programming, is that when you have an aha moment, you can share it with someone. So just make sure that you're always sharing those thoughts and learnings. one effective way to make sure that the pair programming starts is to schedule it. So I have a good rapport with a lot of my coworkers, and I can just message them. I know like what their schedules are like and stuff like that. So I can message them and kind of have an impromptu pairing session. But in the beginning, and maybe we're not at the beginning anymore, but it's generally good to just schedule some time, just so everyone is prepared, and make sure that you make the goal of the pair session clear. So you may have a ticket that you're working on. That's a good starting point. If you don't have a ticket, you can just shoot them a message or on the calendar invite. Just say, I want to cover refactoring this class-based component to a functional component, or I want to improve the performance of the database query on this page. One thing that may not be immediately apparent is that it's important that you have kind of this face-to-face interaction with your partner. Here at Collab Lab, we're working remotely. So make sure that you keep your video on. If you're working in person with someone, which sounds more and more like a distant memory, right? But when you're working with somebody, you're getting this feedback of body language, like if the person's tired, maybe you're not working as productive as you were an hour ago. You get this kind of feedback that the person may not say it, but you can tell from their body language. So it's important to keep your camera on, if possible, through pair programming. Dialogue. So that is, if not the most important thing, one of the most important things here. So make sure you're always talking. Pair programming, when it's at its best, is not when two people are staring at their computer screen and not saying anything and one person's typing. Like if you can hear the mechanical keyboard and not any voices, then you should probably just talk more. If you're struggling with what to talk about, just shoot the breeze a bit, ask how they're doing, what they've been up to. But yeah, dialogue is really key. Talk about how, I guess if we're going to switch it back to the dialogue related to the problem, talk about if you're not in the middle of solving something, talk about how you want to solve it. Ask questions, right? Speaking of ask questions, you might get stuck or frustrated. So if both of you are having trouble with what you're trying to get working in the code, that's totally normal. Just because you have the two brains working on it doesn't mean that you won't have any struggles. So make sure that you reach out in Slack and try to unstuck yourself. And one other thing I want to mention here is that pair programming, I think, especially until you get really, really used to it, can be really more fatiguing than regular programming. So what I mean by that is not only are you spending a lot of brain cycles thinking about typing and solving problems and what variable name should I use and is this a greater than sign, all these things, but you're interacting with people socially, and depending on the type of person you are, that can be fatiguing. So make sure that you start slow and do like short bursts, maybe 30 minutes or an hour, and take breaks. I think that's important. Even companies that do pair programming regularly as part of their company culture don't do it for 8 hours a day. So don't expect that from yourself. So how it looks from a bird's eye view, and I think there's nothing dogmatic or rigid here. So it's whatever works for you and your partner. But generally how it works is two people jump on a video call, they pick out a driver, and that person shares their screen and drives to the code base. The navigator will be asking questions and hopefully guiding the driver. When you reach a stopping point, when either the feature's done or you think that it's good enough where you don't have the code in a broken state, you can commit that code, push it up, and you can switch. I encourage you to switch often, right? You don't have to do it like every 5 minutes, but it's good to get that like switch in context, going from bird's eye view to driver. And then when you switch roles and the driver becomes a navigator, and the navigator becomes a driver. Yeah. So here to finish up. So let's talk about the mindset and attitude. So here we have on the screen here, pairing as an exercise in sharing your Lego. Here's where I ask, do you know what I mean when I say sharing your Lego? But I imagine there's at least one person on the call who doesn't know what that means, so I'll explain it real quick. So think about a kid, right? You give them this humongous playroom, a big giant tub full of like Legos that they built up over the years. And the kid's always saying like, I wish I had a new Lego set. I wish I had this Lego set. And you're like, I have 10 million Lego pieces. And like, oh, those Lego pieces suck, right? And then they invite their friend over, and the friend starts taking the Legos out of the thing to build something, and they're like, no, this is mine, build it this way, build it this, no, don't touch that, I built that like 2 years ago, don't take, they get really possessive over it, even though they just the other breath were like bashing their Lego collection, right? So code can be like that, where it's super common for people to sit there and complain about code. That's what engineers do best, right? But make sure you don't have this mentality of it's like, it's my code, right? You can't touch it. Don't do this, don't do that. In reality, it's all of our code. So we should all be sharing and moving forward together. So one important thing here, I think I mentioned that earlier, is ask questions. So when you want to spark conversation and discussion, it's best not to tell someone how to do something unless they ask, right? But if you want to figure out the best solution for something, generally you can start with a question. So instead of you should put the database query here, you can ask, what do you think about putting the database query here? Do you think that this would be the most efficient way to do it, or is there a better way? Generally, people are more responsive to questions, I think, than declarations, right? As the driver, so that's kind of from a navigator's perspective. As the driver, you want to make sure that you are on the same page with the other person before you move on. You don't want to be just like going nuts in the code base and then the navigator be kind of clueless to where you are. You want to make sure you go together. And one other bullet point here I think is interesting. It's not really about, I guess, pair programming in its traditional sense is not about teaching or mentorship as much as working together. So have that perspective when you're going into it. You're just working with your teammate. All right. Here at the end here, I aborted here a little early, but we have some links here that are all really great resources to learn more about pair programming. And I'm going to send this presentation out on Slack. And afterwards, I'd like y'all to just go in there and maybe read one of these. And that is it.
Yay.
Thank you.
Very informative.
So good. So how did those points that were covered align with like what you've experienced here or on other teams that you might be a part of? Were some of those things you were already doing, or did any of them give you new ideas about how you'll approach pair programming next week?
Yeah, I think for me, I definitely understand. I think everybody I've worked with, well, yeah, we worked with the whole team. So all the entire team, I think we've done this, but I think having I know having names and identifying it now moving forward, it makes more sense. And also the switching part, I think just to kind of help take breaks and to kind of, like you said, not do it every 5 minutes, but I think we've all been navigators and drivers, but maybe slid into more one role than the other. And it works from a team perspective. But yeah, the tiring part, I don't know, maybe that's what we ran into this week collectively. We were just like, because maybe it was just so much of not understanding of pacing ourselves as pair programming. So yeah, good.
Anybody else have thoughts on it?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting just the suggestion of switching a lot. I think like during the pair programming sessions that I've been a part of, we've tried to we're meeting it for an hour and then one person does an hour and then the other person does an hour the next time. I haven't thought of like switching on a regular cadence. as much. I definitely am excited to try that out and see what comes of that.
What I love about that is like you get such different skills from being the driver versus being the navigator, and both are so valuable. And so not only are you picking up those different skills each time, but you're also getting more familiar with the code that's being written in the moment, because you get to like play both roles. So like you wrote a bunch of code. Well, now right in front of you, you're going to switch and the other person's going to start driving with the code that you just wrote. And so now you both have this like this new fresh knowledge about the code that was written because you both touched it. And so it's like just makes you more able to navigate through the code with like confidence that you're not going to break something because you like understand it on a new level.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
One thing I didn't mention before is I've learned so much, especially as Zapier lately, watching other people write code. It's not just the actual like code that you're typing, but there's so much extra that you can learn, like how they navigate their text editor. So Nabil, you made a couple of comments when we were coding earlier this week where you're like, what's that? And I was like, oh, that's the extension that lets me see who committed this line. And you're like,
I've got that
awesome.
now.
What's that?
I have it. I know who's committing everything now.
When you might hear about that on Twitter, that extension, but you don't think about installing it. And when you see it in action, that changes things. So when you switch off between people, you learn about how they write code, not just the code they're writing. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think also too, at least going through this video, but looking about my experience with it, and which has really actually been a lot of Collab Lab is in the last couple of weeks, because I think a lot of us have just been on our own, or maybe if we were in boot camp, you're still or self-teaching. Like it's easy when you're like, oh, I wrote all of this or I did that, so you're very familiar with it. But I think you know, as you know, if you're like navigating and you kind of are doing that, you can get you're comfortable with like what you searched or what you found, and okay, this is kind of where you put this, but then you go back and look at the code and you're like, what? Like you're a bit lost because you may not have actually written that. So it's, yeah, I definitely get that.
Helping with communication is good. It's like, it's definitely hard to communicate technical stuff, especially over video chat when you're trying to like, well, there's this part here, and I'm like, oh God, my typing is horrible when people are watching me. But and just trying to communicate when you have differences or explaining how you think your approaches are going. So it's definitely been a learning experience for that. Like usually I've worked with I did work as kind of like a project manager on a open source project that was kind of wildly chaotic, and having kind of these really high level people who are like, oh yeah, you just got to have all of this architecture, and nobody knew what was going on, and nobody would ask questions because they were too afraid to look dumb. And so I would just ask stupid questions, and they'd be like, I can't believe you don't know that. And I was like, well, I'm sorry, but I would ask it in public so that other people could hear it, because I knew that they didn't know what was happening. And that's just like not a great way to be, but communication is key, which I think is like, this is definitely helping for that process.
Yeah, to kind of I guess in a way make it more digestible and kind of just slow it down a bit, because as we know, tech kind of moves fast. So people do something and they may grab a resource and they'll do this, and you're like, wait a minute, where'd you get that from? What's this? Like, what are we doing now? Where you type that? Okay, wait, what? Like, so it's like even the thought processes, you know, I think we naturally just maybe feel like we want to, or maybe that's the speed that you kind of get adjusted to doing. You're just kind of moving, and yeah.
There's so much to be said too about like just rubber ducking with your partner. Like so many times throughout the week, I'll even ask like Alejandro to get on with something. I'll be like, help me, this is broken, I don't know how to fix it. And like having the pressure of him watching me, I'm like, here's the answer right here.
Is it right? Like, wait a minute, I know what I'm doing, I really do.
Like just having somebody be looking at the same thing as you, like can help you see things like through a clearer lens, which is cool to experience.
Wonderful.
You all are amazing. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
You're so good at this. Okay. So with that, are you ready for another week that will hopefully be a little bit easier on you than this last one?
Maybe. Yeah, let's go.
Let's do it. Let me share my screen and we'll walk through it. I sent the threads for this week. Screen share. This number 1. Okay. It looks like we have some things in review and progress here still. So I'll just ask that you pop over there and update the board to be wherever those are. I'm not sure what the status of both of those PRs were, but just move them accordingly, close them if they're merged into master. If you don't already know this, I think that you might. I think I saw it in one of Nabil's PRs maybe, but in your actual PR description, if you write closes number 6 or number 7, when that's merged into master, it'll automatically close the issue, which can be a nice little automation.
Okay.
But the issues for this week are number 7. As a user, I want to see a welcome prompt to add the first item if the list is empty to help me get oriented to how to use the app. You might take a look at the example app if you want to better know how that works. Also, feel free to use your imagination and create whatever you want. And then issue number 8. As a user, I want to mark an item on my shopping list as purchased. Do either of those stand out to anybody? Anybody grab one of those real quick? Sounds like one is kind of a little more database heavy, like marking an item as purchased, and one is like a little more UI centric. I mean, they both have both, to be honest.
Let's go with number 7.
Okay, so Devon and Nabil together again. Issue number 7. Okay. Let's find this. Oop, not to me.
It's too late.
Ah!
It's all you now, Stacy. It's all you.
Oh, me, all right. Okay, Devon, Nabil, and oop. And is it gonna let me remove it? Let me full screen this. Watch me putz around here. Okay, and apparently
You have to open that pop-up back up and click yeah.
Awesome. Okay, there's that one. In progress. Oh my gosh, y'all. I know how to work a computer, I swear.
See, this is when everybody's watching and this is like, like turn on.
Oh my God, I did it again. I'm really bad at computers.
Take your time.
This is where you say GitHub is not accessible. Just blame it on GitHub. Dang Microsoft.
Okay, they are assigned. Let me stop my screen share and we will go into breakout rooms. Michael, Alejandro, any specific one you want to take?
I can go with 7.
8. Okay.
Ah, that's great.
Nice.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Okay, assign Alejandro, Nabil, on 7, I believe. If I'm doing this wrong, I'm sorry. You can either correct me or you can just roll with the bunches. Michael, Megan, and Tansy. I think that's right. Does that sound right?
Megan and yeah. I don't
know. That's right. Okay, opening the rooms. Such amazing work. See you in the breakout rooms.
Ready?
I'm going to join Alex.
Hola, hola.
Hola, hola.
¿Cómo has estado?
Hey. Nice. All right. So let's see. Do you want me to share my screen? So we can talk about the issue.
Sure.
Yeah, you can be the driver. See, I'm using those words.
Oh, so good.
There you go.
I usually prefer Alejandro to drive and navigate for me.
Oh my gosh. So much pressure. All right. So let's see. We have this beautiful issue here. So let's see. As a user, I want to see a welcoming prompt to add my first item if my list is empty to help me get oriented how the app works. So, all right. What do you think we need here to get started, or what data need beforehand?
As a user, I want to see a welcoming prompt to add my first item. So something like, I don't know, you like added first prompt, congrats or something. I mean, is that kind of the
Yeah, I think
yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
like think about the users. Like think about like how would like I don't know my mom. What would my mom like to see here?
Yeah. Okay.
So that would make things way easier. Yeah, think about. So
Yeah,
all right.
I kind of think too, like whenever you sign up for a new app, they all have these like kind of like demos, walkthroughs that they try and make you go through. And it's like, what are like the main pieces of that? What is like the number one and maybe number two thing you wanted to know about when you signed up for this app? And let's just keep it at that.
Mm-hmm.
It's also like, how do you want this to pop up? Do you want this to be like an actual pop-up, like some kind of alert, or do you want it to just be like, you know, part of the view, like a component that's just kind of like, is it something they can exit out of? Is it something that exists until they add an item?
Wait, do we have like creative freedom over this thing?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So we like all the
thinking.
so we don't have to follow like all the visual stuff that I've been trying to match to that. I never needed to do
No.
that. I could just
No,
No.
not at all.
Sorry, I tried to make that clear on the kickoff call. I just thought that you were like a stickler for the design, you know.
No, I would rather do
Okay. Do
Okay.
literally, this is your app.
You're free.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
He's like, I'm ready now. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Andrew is the one who designed the original one, and Andrew is not a designer. So
No, he
use
is
your
not.
design skills to.
Okay, cool.
This was,
That's amazing.
Here we go. Here we go.
20 hours
We are-
this week.
we
He's
are
like, I've
gonna-
got so much cleanup to do here.
No, we are going to have fun.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, right. All right.
And that's why I picked this one. I picked it on purpose. I did. I was like, okay. Like,
it wasn't like, oh, that one has the database. Whatever doesn't have the database. That was those. So yeah, like this makes sense to me. Does it make sense to you, Devon?
Yeah, it does. I mean, like, I think there's, I think, you know, not being a design person, but, yeah, you can have fun with this, however you want to do it. I think, you know, just from a user standpoint, like, yeah, you can really make it, you know.
How do you think, what do you think is going to signify to the app whether this should be displayed or not?
You just, like, basically the token. If it's, if it has a, oh no, it wouldn't be. It would basically
There's
be
ways you could do it. So no wrong answers.
Yeah. Honestly, the way that I would have probably have set this up is that the landing of the route would drop you off on an empty list and prompt you and with the option to like add something, like add a grocery item just right there, or to join an existing list. And that's how it would like default to. And then it would skip the whole welcome screen. It would skip the join existing screen. It would basically be a landing page that is an empty list and has like an add button at the bottom, but there'd be no switching back and forth between like adding and viewing, if that makes any sense.
I don't know. You can, I guess if we're doing this, like you can, you know, you want it to be, it says, I want to see a welcoming prompt to add my first item if the list is empty. And so, yeah, you want it to be something that is inviting and welcoming, like, hey, you know, like happy shopping, like, well, you know, let's get started or something where it's, this is a definitely, I mean, yeah, there's the database aspect, but it's very a user experience aspect as well that initially. So yeah, there's a lot that you can really do with this.
It sounds like y'all are good to go here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe. Talk to us on Wednesday.
No, I think you totally got this one. I think this one will be like a breeze compared to last week for you.
Yeah, this week is going to be easier for sure.
Yeah, I hope so.
Great.
Don't overthink it.
No, we're good.
Yeah, we have help too, and I think
Yeah, awesome. And be noisy if you need help, please.
Okay.
All right.
Definitely will. Okay. Thank you so
all right,
much.
thank you guys.
Fun.
Yes.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.